Hiya, this is Kitten Features, and you're listening to Show X Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to Show X Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado.
Hey, wait a second. I'm on the show too, and I don't get any billing at all? Well, I know how to solve this. Soldater, Fremad, march! You're listening to Show X with our favorite Scotsman Ken, our child of the corn Wayne, currently living in Colorado, and Todd, who now has an army of angry Norwegians at his back. Enjoy the show!
You know what the best part about having an army of angry Norwegians at your back is? They work for timber.
For timber?
Very good.
Nice. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. It is just after 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT on this Easter Sunday for those who celebrate the holiday that is happening today. And it is... I'm trying to keep it cool.
It's, you know what, in the whole history of history, and the Lord said you got to rise up, right? And that's the only time anybody ever obeyed. It's today.
Oh, man. So, I jokingly not associate with today's date, but yesterday's date, I was quite pleased when going down and on my mix on Spotify or such as I was driving the song, I'm going to get the name wrong, but is it, oh shoot. The actual name I forget, but the whole line that mattered yesterday because it was the date is when it does the countdown, the 4, 3, 2, 1, every time. I'm trying to remember the song. Is that Mr. Tom or whatever? It's like anyhow, because the date yesterday was
too young for this reference.
Was April 3rd. Of 2021.
So 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Yep.
And so I heard the song, was like, hey, I wanted to hear that song today, actually. And it came on. That made me pleased. And for those that, as I do my tech nerd thing today, on April 4th of 1975, Microsoft is founded in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The company originally spelled its name Micro-Soft before dropping the hyphen in 1981.
There you go.
I didn't know that, actually.
It is a year older than me. I did not realize that Microsoft is that old. So anyhow, but hey, everybody, today. Oh, go ahead, Todd.
It's tradition that around Easter time they play the Charlton Heston version of the movie The Ten Commandments too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
Nice.
It was one of those appointment viewing for the whole family.
Gotcha. Yep. Well,
right.
I can see that.
Because it's Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else super duper duper famous in it. Like one other person whose name I can't remember. Okay. But the hairdo that Charlton Heston has after he comes down off the hill, with the Ten Commandments is fantastic.
I will have to go look it back up.
Windswept, gray-streaked mane, and it is glorious.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I haven't followed that. I'll have to check it out, or at least look for the image.
Yeah.
So
good stuff. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's all good. So for those celebrating Easter, happy He is Risen Day and things like that I won't be snarky about today. We are to. There's jokes that can be had.
I might be. I can hold back.
But today we're going to be talking a little bit about the iconic entities that we find in gaming. Some of the characters that we experience that help drive the narrative and help share basically in the experience as we ourselves are playing through the stories in the game. So some of basically the most memorable characters that have been identified in our gaming history. And kind of bringing some of those up. In general, trying to go for that, top 10 list, if you will. But it'll be curious to see what each of us come up with for what it find is iconic or is the most memorable in the various characters we've experienced throughout gaming. So that is our goal for today. But I'm going to be kind of curious because I did look up and find some sites, although I've since lost them as I had to reboot this computer this morning. What some of the characters each of you guys will bring up and why you find them to be so memorable. And admittedly, I looked initially and started to make a list of notes that was based on initially the protagonist in most of the stories. I just started there in the sense of like, which characters did I play that were memorable versus just the characters around in the game, right? Because there are a lot that are, I would say, in many cases, like villains or the antagonists, right? The ones that you're interacting against that are often very memorable. And in some ways, I would even argue more memorable than you as a player character doing, since in so many cases for me, the protagonist is either silent in a lot of types of games, think most shooters and stuff like that, and or because it's you playing the character or role in some way, they kind of don't provide as much story content from your perspective because they don't know what you think, right? And so they try to work in ways of presenting story regardless of your hero character. And that happens a ton where how many silent heroes there are in it. And I think I saw I forget the video series that's out there that they always do like real life mimicking like MMO or RPG elements in games and stuff and kind of do joke things on it, like women's armor versus men's armor in games and stuff where they do these silly parodies. But they did one on the silent hero character, right? And showing a guy just show up walking and all the characters around saying, wow, this journey's been so epic. And a gal coming to the main character saying like, but over this last, these traveling miles, I feel like I've really grown to know you and that I really have feelings. And the whole time the character's just standing there like, because silent protagonist, right? And so that kind of those memes and jokes. And for those in the chat, Ken has put forth a poll that you can jump in to, I believe, participate, right?
Did somebody add me to the poll? Why am I?
No, that's Street Fighter Ken, not Ken.
I was like, I am a very memorable.
I can't edit. Can I edit that? No,
I can. I've got admin rights. I'll moderate.
Yeah, why don't you pop Street Fighter 2, not Dr. Professor, Rear Admiral, Jedi Master, Ken Reed Esquire.
I don't know. I surely I am one of the most memorable ones. I mean,
CPA. You're a memorable character. I just don't know that you've been in a video game.
I actually have been. So during my high school years, a friend of mine, well, actually early university, a friend of mine went to a video game course, and they had to make some, crappy 3D game with like custom voice acting and stuff. And I offered to help out because, I said I have a microphone and everything. Obviously doing the show, even back then, 9 years ago. And so I showed up with my microphone and I recorded myself saying a bunch of like, it wasn't actually voice, it was like noises. Like I think I was this grumpy old wizard. And so it was, generic video game noises like
yep.
Like that sort of stuff. And yeah, so and then he like put it online, I think. So I am in a video game somewhere technically. I don't think it did particularly well. I don't think it like stuck around or anything, but I'm technically in a video game.
There you go. So yes, you can go in there, throw your name down, and vote for.
Technically, you're a video game character then.
I am, yeah.
But yeah, joining the poll, we'll keep track of it to see what you guys think for most memorable video game characters. So that's liven up now, and you guys can take part. But from our perspective, right, I was gonna kick things off with just like throwing a name out there to kind of start the conversation and see if we come together on a level of top 10, as you will. So one of the characters I was going to throw forth is Lara Croft, because I'm actually, like I said, going forward as characters you play. And the reason I love Lara Croft is, one, she's been around forever, and I think is highly recognizable. Like everything from the original polygon, triangle, formed Laura Croft we were introduced to what is now a
It makes us all giggle like little boys.
Yep.
Hey, right? You know, for the joy that was, as just her image comes up on the past, but to the now modern rendition and everything in between of Laura, where she, in my mind, had always been a powerful protagonist that you're playing the action of, but they always gave it like cutscenes and story and things with it. And in those ways, from when they early started providing some levels her interactions with others, it wasn't the original PlayStation ones, because those I don't think really had many cutscenes and such, and kind of extreme things you're doing all the way from dual pistoling, you know, a Tyrannosaurus kind of thing. But when you went into the later games where they started adding it, they always really built her in with the strength of her background, where, yeah, she was this educated British gal and came from wealth, but her family were always out there and exploring the world and doing things, and she grew up with that and extended it, right, and became her own entity going in and dealing with all these struggles. Initially as kind of just the historian, the, you know, female Indiana Jones type character who just out there for finding things and relics and stuff, but it seemed to always end up in these situations of defeating some bad entity that was out there trying to exploit the historic relics of the past and the power they could provide. And I always liked her snarkiness, her just like independence, right? That it was like, I can deal with all these things, good, bad, ugly, horrible, these horrific injuries and stuff, but still continuing on and dealing with the exploration, the smarts of history, things like that. So for me, she was a character that came more to life than some of the classics you'll see that you maybe just were a vision on the screen. And so that's one I throw forth as kind of one that I thought for me has always been memorable. All the way back from the, you know, I'm traipsing through dungeons and jungles and stuff in booty shorts, you know, a, you know, shirt, or it might have even been almost like a tank top initially, right? And dual pistols.
I think it was, but that was part of my childhood. Like I played Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3. I think during my pre-high school years, you know, and nice. I played all the way through them. And I loved them.
So yeah, that's what I'm throwing out there, and it's just one that's memorable. And I appreciate, like, yes, we're gonna get the classics, right? As Soda Pop brings in there to me, but is she as iconic as, say, Sonic, Crash, Mario, or Link, right? And I think part of it is there's a level of what we've discussed, kind of the title of iconic, but I think more specifically, in a lot of what I was speaking to and looking for, hopefully, is memorable. Like, what is it about the character itself or the presentation of the story they presented, something that made them memorable and iconic in a way, in the sense that, yes, you can recognize, I believe, some of these characters. So Mario is iconic and is memorable, but is it because Mario the character, or just the character design and the games we all played? And so for me, Laura, I think, is more memorable because of the story and character she is.
But she's more memorable for her attributes. And I'm not making a euphemism there. I mean that seriously. Whereas Mario is iconic because everybody had a Nintendo, right? And
that's kind of,
and he's got wicked sick longevity, right? He has, I mean, what, 35 years now, even more if you go all the way back to Jumpman in the original DK. So like, he turns 40 this year.
Is it?
Oh my God.
Yeah, the original Donkey Kong's 1981.
Okay.
So yeah, he turns 40 this year.
Oh,
and
wow.
And so yeah, he's as close to a ubiquitous video game character as there is. Right? There's as far as like a person, like you could argue that the ship in Space Invaders, or the ship in Defender, or something like that might be more ubiquitous, but as terms of people, I don't think he's any more I don't think he's any more exposed than any. I think he's as much or more exposed than anybody, I guess.
Okay. Nice. So
So I think we're all kind of distracted because we're watching the poll and we're adding.
I know.
things to the poll and
I did just
everything.
look over
I
at the
think that's the
polls. Like, look at
problem
all
with-
these names.
Yes,
So
the problem.
one
with
of us can
moderating
monitor the poll. Everyone else has
Yeah.
to keep going. But
Yes.
I'll watch the poll for now. I've got the admin rights. I'll go through and I still need to do some editing as well.
Dead
Um,
air.
so
But
as we're
it's funny,
talking
you're
about
this idea of what's memorable though. I mean, like it's funny because half the people on that list I had to look up, not because I forgot their name or anything, but just didn't immediately come to mind, which makes me not want to vote for them. One, for example, which I'm surprised I didn't think of immediately, was Pac-Man. Right? That's an ubiquitous.
how did you not think about Pac-Man like right away at all
Right?
on like icon?
Well, no, but I don't. You know, it's a situation where I don't give Pac-Man a lot of thought in a discussion of video games unless we're talking specifically about a topic where Pac-Man is germane germane to the topic, or we're talking about the history of video games.
Yeah,
right. In which
'cause as a-
Pac-Man is an important chapter.
Yeah, as a character, I don't even think Pac-Man exists in my list as like a character. He was the icon that I played on in the machinations of the game, right? In order to accomplish it.
Yeah.
But I never identified it as the character or the thing I played. It was just waka 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 waka, and it's like okay, whatever.
Like I
it
didn't
gained
think
life
of him, I thought of
later.
him as a thing and not necessarily a person until he showed up in, humanized version in the cartoon in the
Yeah.
80s. Right.
No, and I agree. So that's one where for me, I mean, is it a thing or maybe a character that you can identify? Yes, and if that's the reason you would put them on a list, I get something. It's not one I would vote for because it's just kind of like, okay, that's something I did. Now,
Well,
but I will say,
when was the last time you played Pac-Man versus when was the last time you played Mario? And if we're gonna make that our standard, then I'd argue Ms. Pac-Man is more iconic than Pac-Man because Ms. Pac-Man was more played because Ms. Pac-Man was the better game.
it was a better game. It also had the onus of being like a legitimately female character that you played as in the game. It was noted for that, right? Is like they made that an actual effort as something to identify. Whether it was
Especially
anything
back
anybody,
then, right?
Yeah, that's kind of thing, right? Way back in early '80s, kind of thing.
Okay, I'm going to sidetrack this whole conversation. This is what I dislike about the cultural critique of stuff that's 40 years old, because most of the time the cultural critiquers do not spend any time discussing what the business environment of those times were.
Okay,
Right? So in an environment where there had never been a direct sequel arcade cabinet before, like why wouldn't you make Ms. Pac-Man instead of taking the risk and calling it Pac-Man 2?
Oh, that's fair. It identifies
Right,
very
considering-
distinctly.
Plus, you know
Right?
what? If the first Pac-Man is more interesting to men because it's got male character, then you're then appealing to the other 50%. You're just going to grow your consumer base because the people who already played the first one more likely, if they think along the lines of gender and such as being a reason to choose a game, then you're just going to increase your initial crowd. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? It's only logical to increase your consumer base, right?
Well, there are all kinds of marketing reasons to it. I wasn't aware because so often in video games, I personally really paid attention to what character was being presented because video games can provide such a breadth of examples from you can play everything from literally a shape on a screen to something that has more meat to it, more story behind it that you can maybe place in a real world, right? As something
Right.
that you identify. Which actually brings up one because I noticed teased or played with the idea of memorable characters. What about Tetris? What about the L? What about the Long Peak in each of those games? Weren't those memorable?
Right,
And-
is a memorable character, I guess.
Well, you say
It's,
character. For me,
viruses.
it was a
The
thing.
viruses in Dr. Mario.
Those had more character than any of the pieces in Tetris to me.
At least they
so,
moved.
so I appreciate the comment in there. I think that's silly and fun,
That's funny.
but I don't see them as characters, And Unit brings up kind of what we're talking about the what's the question of, is it more about iconic, meaning recognizable, or memorable in something about the actual presentation of the character? Because he says, everyone knows Pac-Man and Mario, but are not, he thinks, as memorable in the same way as Cloud and Aerith were, and such. And so that's, I think, part of the discussion. For me, I'm leaning more heavily on the memorable side versus just iconic.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about characters, again, I have my list that I started with protagonists, the characters you play at that you can actually identify or do something with. I mean, no question what I'll bring up, and he was just on screen, is Master Chief, right, in the Halo series. Is kind of, I'd say, a combination of both. And an interesting one where, for a large portion initially, seemed to be kind of the silent protagonist, but has extended on, and has so much character development around you as the player character and what they're describing and what the type of character you are, being a Spartan and everything were, that I know for me, there was this level of you're playing as Master Chief and actually feeling it with a bit of like, I am this super built, created human kind of thing beyond the regular race that's going in there and just checking things and shooting and doing all these things. It's why I can jump high. It's why I can run like I can, all of those things. And the experience I'm being put into gave me the role of, and I'm just being that Master Chief, never an officer or anything. I am just the one who is going to get stuff done in the world of adversity, because as Master Chief, I have to do that right thing, whatever it feels like at that time. And so it gave an element of like just pushing and pressing and keeping playing with it that for me is very memorable. Whether the games themselves were great or not at different times, man, Master Chief I can just see, to the point where I have a printed helmet sitting over on my shelf there from Master Chief, right, that I had made.
He represents gaming, I think, to so many people, and especially in a younger to, well, not younger anymore, millennial type generation, because people my age grew up with Master Chief as sort of like a mascot, right?
That's why Western civilization is doomed. Because Master Chief is just a knockoff of OG Doom guy.
Oh no, he's not.
Yes, he is.
Maybe he is a little bit.
Well, but it's talking about the level of what they did with the character. So you can argue like any FPS thing, right, is basically back to back to Wolfenstein, Castle Wolfenstein, or whatever, Return, or whatever, Wolfenstein. They're like 3D first person, go shoot things, because that's the role you're doing. But it's when people take that style of play and give it something that makes it more memorable in the sense, right? Something you actually think back to more. Because when I played as Doom Guy, Quake Guy, and stuff like that, there's a reason they're like Doom Guy and Quake Guy. Because easily more memorable than any of them is Duke Nukem. Because at least Duke Nukem, as a character you played as, had lines and things that said, right, the snarkiness of the character came out as being like, Doom Guy and Quake Guy never said a dang word. They never interacted with anything. You just went and shot stuff. There was no character there. It was just a role that a lens you were able to put yourself into the world to shoot things. Whereas with Duke Nukem, he's talking to the world, and you get this attitude of him just being like, get some, and stuff. The things he would say that you're just like, ha, yeah. I feel like the '80s action movie protagonist. And in that way, even playing a pixelated nonsense game like that, I got charged when, what's the next thing he's going to say? Or, I did epically kill the stuff with a rocket launcher or tripwire mine or something, and I got the satisfaction of him acknowledging it as well. That made me feel like I am this guy with the shades on, tank top, big gun, just walking around like,
I wanna challenge you on something. Is it more badass to say "come get some," or is it more badass that when somebody tells you the human race is not yours to save anymore, you turn around, your character turns around, looks at the person saying that, and out of spite racks your shotgun, doesn't say a word, and then turns back around to go save the human race?
That's Doom
Eternal.
But that's
Right?
a moment. Now, granted, I have not played Doom Eternal yet. I will freely admit.
Well, I haven't either, but I've watched the cutscenes
Okay.
because
Well, but even in Doom Eternal and Doom the 2013, 2016, I forget, 16, right?
Slayer.
It's like he's still such a faceless thing, and you get a little bit of development, but it's more from the enemies kind of just saying like, this is the thing we need to avoid, right? He's in kind of some kind of cryostasis thing, and when he comes out of it, it's like, oh no, Doom Guy's coming. But that's like his development. It's just
So, but I mean, this is the thing that you know, and it's really tough to compare those two, like OG Doom Guy and Duke Nukem, because Duke Nukem Forever is so bad, and Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal are really good.
yeah,
And
those
part
are
of
quality
part of what
games with the
makes-
character.
Well, sure, but part of what makes, I mean, you can talk about the fact that Doom 2016 is a technical powerhouse and the combat is really smooth and exactly what you would expect from a sort of a modern FPS in the style of Doom, and you can talk about all of that, but it also built a mythos around the Doom Guy, and we all have this shared context for who or what he is, right?
I guess
If
to a
you- if you-
degree, but I never
Right,
thought
so we
any
went-
depth about Doom Guy. For me, it was just, again, he was just the paper cutout I got to jump into to go shoot stuff. Like, he still
Okay.
didn't have any personality to me, and the story about him was limited in my mind to kind of just like the guy that shoots stuff because he needs to go shoot stuff, save us
That's fair.
from hell or whatever alien interpretation.
Sure. And let's be real. In 1990, you know, you didn't put story in games like that. So the story is such that it is, right? And they made books around that. Like, I've read the Doom books, the original set that came out in the 90s. So, like, a story was built around it, but he doesn't have much of a story in and of himself. I grant you that. Whereas Duke clearly had more thought put into who he was as a person.
Well, that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of characters that seem to just fill the void of being the first ones in that archetype, right? So you have like the first Doom Guy, Quake Guy sort of archetypes where they don't their story is, you know, technically there, but it's almost like an afterthought. You know, like they're really just archetypical dude with, you know, huge muscles beating up bad guys, right? That's all they are. That's an
Right.
archetype, right? But then later on, you have more characters that are much more in depth and fill very specific niches, I think. But they can't quite climb to that level of great. Like Pac-Man, for example, is only like if he came out now, nobody would know who Pac-Man is because it would be like, well, that's not even a game. Like, why would people play that? But because it's a part of our history, we really care about it, right? So when we talk about what's memorable, like there's some characters in the modern era that I think have made a big impression. Like one of the examples in that list actually is Goose from Untitled Goose Game, right? If you asked this question 2 years ago, I think a lot of people would put it down as one of their top answers because it was on the top of their minds as the, you know, short-term memory, I would say. But I don't think it'll be memorable in 10 years' time.
Okay, that's fair.
I agree with that. Yeah, I don't think, because you said Goose and I never played it, so I was like, yeah, I remember it was a thing, and
Yeah.
as a character, completely gone. I remember
Yeah.
Goose was apparently a real a-hole, and I remember a knife and mouth image, and that's like my entire knowledge of what a character in Goose Game might be,
Well,
right, for me.
and you know, it's so to your point, Ken. This is why I think Tifa and the Turks are vastly more interesting Final Fantasy VII characters than Cloud or Aerith or any of the others, right? And I mean, in Final Fantasy VII, like Red 13 gets a significant story attached to him, and yet I think Tifa's far more iconic. Number one, because of the Advent Children film.
Okay.
And,
So
and
due to
number
the external things that have grown around it.
well, and so that's part of it, but the other part of it is she got the badassest of all the abilities. Like any idiot can swing a sword. Like it's not and be angsty, right? Like we're gonna talk about that archetype over and over and over again. Um uh but she uses her fists as weapons and she can suplex giant robots.
That's
Right?
pretty awesome.
She
Yeah.
got the and again, this goes back to again the game right before it in Final Fantasy VI, where you could suplex the train, right? And it's ridiculous and silly. They didn't take that out, so yeah, Tifa can pick up little teeny tiny Tifa can pick up a giant robot, lift it into the air, and then drop it on its head. Like how that's like, and to me, it's like, oh, I'm angsty and I swing a sword and I have yellow hair. Versus, no, I'm gonna kick. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna punch this robot in the face a bunch of times. Then I'm gonna kick it in the face. Then I'm gonna pick it up and drop it on its head. Right? And it's just like, okay, great. Like, give Tifa the professional wrestler. Yep, sign me up.
So I will agree in the sense that the discussion about just Final Fantasy VII as characters, right? Because the game itself is iconic, is memorable. It is something so many people point to as a reference for their introduction to Final Fantasy for a lot of people. And it's one of those things that I'm like, so with that, who's memorable in that? Because the game itself is big, right? And so often, where we go between protagonist and antagonist side of things, I always remember Cloud, but that's because you see his spiky hair the majority of the game. I remember Aerith because, for me, still Aeris, how I played, that getting killed and the scene of, but almost a way more so than both of them is like, for me, Sephiroth, because as a baddie, right, Sephiroth was like, that's not going to be fun whenever I actually have to deal with him, right? And so it's funny because for me, almost more memorable in a lot of ways, but not specifically iconic as a character to me, were the summons. Ifrit and those, because they had such an epic feel when you brought them in. Now, but at the same time, I don't give it anything about it being like those characters actually being memorable characters, because they weren't. They were just a big showpiece thing that would come in and hit. So for me, as much as those characters out there, I think Cloud gets a nod because everybody recognizes the big sword and him jumping in there. But I think when you start to bring depth to the discussion, honestly, for me, none of the Final Fantasy characters even bubble up to me. Like, there are scenes and there are moments in the game that kind of led to what is memorable about gaming history.
Sure.
But the actual characters to me were primarily shallow. Like, I get more story from Aerith and what they actually discuss about what she's doing in the world. And again, when you talk about external comments and later information about her, even more so learning about her being, and I don't know if I'll get it right, not quite a god aspect or something, but that Aerith herself is an entity bigger than human, celestial or something like that. So I forget what it is she specifically is. That's oh wow, that's pretty interesting. But none of that to me really stuck. And so personal, Final Fantasy VII, while iconic game and stuff, the characters are just kind of I remember them, and I had my own personal connection to Barrett, right? Because it's the fashion of, hey, look, a black character in a Japanese-based game, and he doesn't just suck, right? He's not just there for window dressing, and you better believe I leveled up his gun stuff is a whole lot, right?
I bet you did. You did.
And so, yeah, I was just what's going on? But
by the way, there was a period of time in Final Fantasy VII where my party was the three girls.
Nice.
Tifa, Aeris, and Yuffie. If you can pull off getting Yuffie on disc 1, which isn't necessarily that hard, and you can just play with the three girls and let them run around and have adventures in the world, pretty fun. Pretty fun.
Gotcha. Thank you, Ionis. Yes, she was an ancient. Like I said, I had just recently come across that lore and didn't realize it because I didn't go further on to learn it all. That made me, But I'm your
That-
forever
I'll tell you
casual out
what,
there.
that lore is old enough to drink in America.
Right. Well, as well as and the challenge with Final Fantasy, and we talked about this previously, is that it's such a convoluted series,
Yeah.
right? In that the games mostly just do not connect, and so it's different in its own way. Like Final Fantasy as a game series is pretty iconic. Individual characters had their moments, and it's kind of like for me. And maybe I'd think more after if I played Remake or something that had a different look at them.
Thank you, Earthweaver.
Was that on the list or a comment?
Now on the list. Oh yeah, no, he nailed one that I kind of wanted to talk about, but I didn't. I wasn't sure if it was gonna if we'd get a chance to.
Well, I'm all about each of you guys bringing up some of your own, and I definitely want to make sure we capture the top ones from the list as they bubble through. I want to make sure we get those top ones. So I'm assuming the one you're looking at is kind of what I saw was at the bottom of the list, or a more recent one added. Yeah, man, you guys are prolific. But the one about Tecmo Bowl?
So many.
What's that?
Were you looking at the one about Tecmo Bowl or which?
Yes, Bo Jackson. You have to include him, right? He is so broken in a game that's designed to be football, but an over the top, and not in the like NFL blitz way of over the top, but still sort of grounded in realism, but yet over the top.
You mean it had rules and it played out like it would be football?
He's just broken in a huge degree. Like he would be if you were to take all the tech players that are in the original Tecmo Bowl and do a fantasy draft of them, he is always the number one pick.
Oh yeah.
He is that far and away better than every other player or any other player on any other team, regardless of position. Like
Gotcha.
he's better than Randall Cunningham. He's better than Barry Sanders. He's better than Emmitt Smith. He's better than yeah, he's just better. He's better than all of them. And he just is so good. Oh, and
so
yes,
it's funny.
I would consider it. I think that qualifies as iconic. And the funny thing is, they model him after stuff that he did in real life on the field, right? He was
given an excessive thing because at the time when it was made, this almost goes to Ken's point about the timing at which games were made and how what was known at the time, kind of thing. In that, at the time when that game was created, Bo Jackson on the football field was a massive entity. Like everybody knew him. Everybody, he was doing skill things that people were like, "You can do that," and you got the whole Bo knows kind of thing that came out there, right? He was iconic at the time. It's interesting because outside of that game, right, and unfortunately that game is one that I feel like was played for those of us who are older. And unfortunately is not a game that I think is referenced heavily, and so I'm sure a ton of our audience wouldn't have a clue. And so I think that one may be specific to like you, myself, Earthweaver, Todd, right? That's like those who played that game when it was out there. And so in reference to that, it is pretty big.
Right? The difference between what we were just talking about with Final Fantasy VII, right? Everybody in air quotes played Final Fantasy VII, whereas Tecmo Bowl much more niche.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Type of game. So yeah, I totally get it. I mean, you could talk about Michael Jordan in the original EA Sports basketball games, right? Just
Well, that's the thing. Certain stars at the time that had their thing, they could apply. When it comes to like just memorable across the board, and I after the break, I do want to make sure we get into some of the like outside characters behind protagonists and stuff. And along the line, and this one comes up, and I knew it should be talked about. Soda Pop brings it up, and it's elsewhere in the list stuff, but it's like Pikachu, right? Because
those are the tough ones because they're cross media, right?
Well,
they're cross multiple platforms of media.
It's a character. It's a type of character within the series of Pokemon. However, admittedly, Pikachu as a specific entity has been given so much life, and I think often because of the animated series, right, the cartoon more than anything, because Pikachu's an ass, right, and is such a makes Ash's life difficult for so much of it before earning and trust and stuff like that. But when you think of a series of games and stuff like that, arguably Pikachu is one of the most iconic in the sense that he has become a reference to the brand where you can put up Pikachu and everybody knows Pokemon, even though there are
That's a good point.
however many hundreds now, have they hit 1,000 yet, overall Pokemon in existence now?
Oh, I don't even want to think about that, man. There's just trash bag Pokemon, Bell Pokemon. I don't know.
But from the original, like, 141, 151, whatever Pokemon that originally existed, if you just looked at the original games, right, Pikachu wasn't even a thing. Because he wasn't one of the starters, right? And most people
Pokemon
would
Yellow,
talk...
Right?
But I'm saying, from the original games, they added Yellow to make him
Red
as
and
a
Blue.
starter character. But from Red and Blue, right, you could get, what was it, Squirtle, Charmander, basically.
Charmander and Bulbasaur.
Yeah, right? And so it's with those that existed, but now when you look, you have movies being created that basically Pikachu is the face of, right? In the Pokemon movie, which I actually liked a lot, Pikachu is a major portion of that. When you see anything referencing Pokemon, it's likely Pikachu. And so he's pretty damn known. And it's funny because, as you posted in there, Ken, all of that to be said when all he ever said is Pikachu, Pika, right? And that's all you ever got. But man, you could put that up anywhere and boom, you got Pokemon. Like all that is Pokemon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I don't know if it's more the recognizability of him, if there's anything about because again, the cartoon gave him personality, basically not listening to Ash for so much and being Ash's go-to every time. And so many times where you're like, do you matter? Really? Why aren't you doing look, GLaDOS is right there. What? I mean, Gyarados or whatever. It's like, what do you mean? Like,
Do you remember? I don't know if you guys remember, but the original Pikachu design, he was a much fatter mouse. Like I actually had like the original. It was this little Pikachu that you could like, as long as you made a current with your fingers by touching two metal nodes at the bottom of this little toy, it would go Pika Pika, and so you can touch it, you can just go Pika Pika. And when I was like 8 or something, I loved this thing, right? And but it was a big fat thing, it was wide as it was tall. But if you see the Pikachus in like in the modern animes and stuff, they're like super skinny. Like I prefer my Pikachu realistic. Not these make Pikachu beauty standards realistic, man. Come on.
As Mika's saying, it's all that walking around he did because he wouldn't get into his ball.
That's true. That's true.
And therefore he got fit. I like it. And I love the conversation coming through with characters because I'm happy to jump beyond just the protagonist. I do want to bring up one more protagonist before going, because there's some other ones, and all of these could kind of hit, right? Is that some of these memorable big characters we've run into, and maybe it's the story, maybe it's the character design, stuff like that, but like Kratos, right, from the God of War series, where is going through some stuff. And so the story is pretty epic anyways, but also another character that gave me a sense playing as him of just power and just interaction in a way that it the types of moves, the types of things he was doing were huge. And even the story around him of what he was having to get through and why, and his angst against the gods and stuff like that, just made it so I always think of Kratos as like that guy. Dang. The stuff he went through, and the twin weapons initially, the blades or whatever that he first had, so and such. Cool. His character design of just being this like bald headed, just ripped up, and I forget, was he originally a Spartan or something like that? And I'm trying to remember
he's a Spartan.
Actual backstory with that, right? And coming through that as another playable character was iconic to me. And again, mine is based off a lot of the characters and games I played, because there's other ones I didn't that I've now seen as memorable. Things like Solid Snake and Geralt of Riva and stuff like that. Because I haven't actually played Witcher, and I looked at. Well, I guess I did play the first two Metal Gears. I played the first NES Metal Gears, but not the PlayStation above Metal Gears. And so I know, right? I actually have the original Metal Gear, but I never played more than like an hour of it. So bad. Too many other games. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't know how to say Geralt. It's you guys typing it.
It's
Geralt.
Yeah.
Geralt. Okay, there you go.
Geralt.
Let's say
Geralt, the upper class version of Geralt. Geralt.
So maybe I miss out on those. One of the ones I wanted to throw, and please break me and let go, but that's not necessarily a player character, but one that impact throughout the entire game sequence of it, has got to be GLaDOS.
Oh yeah, she's a good one. She's a very good face of gaming.
Well, it's not for me face, it's the experience I had playing the game, being taunted by, and having to, as the character going into the world, GLaDOS provided so much flavor to the experience that it made the game for me almost more so than the puzzles. That it added an element of like, oh geez, because you have this malevolent, although feels like they are, doing what they feel is right based on programming, I guess. And you're just a cog stuck in their machine. Thing that it was like, man, you make me hate you in some ways, but in other ways I almost understand you. And both from the first and second into
triumph.
little iconic songs and everything.
She's iconic because she's a meme twice, right? The two songs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then Jonathan Coulton, big shout out to him, by the way. Those songs are both excellent.
Oh yeah, totally. Totally. I'm not saying that. I think the songs are both brilliant, but see, I think GLaDOS, if we're talking about just Portal 1, then I think I agree. I think the character of GLaDOS was cheapened by Portal 2.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, that's a new take.
So I understand what they were going for, I think, in Portal 2, because the whole thing, like both the Portal games are really heavy if you step through the fourth wall and really suspend disbelief and put yourself in there, especially Portal 2, right? Because there was a bunch of lore that they put in there, and I remember following this story, and it's like, wow, this is kind of awful.
Yeah,
like
it's
even
dark.
beyond, even beyond what Portal 1 was. Like in Portal 1, it's fine. I'm a rat in a maze, right? And that sucks, and I'm gonna get my way out of it. And then, we don't really know what's happened outside, but this computer is just running everything. So, And you get into Portal 2, and it's just even darker. But then they threw this, because it was so dark, they threw in a comic relief character, and I don't.
With Wheatley?
It just felt. It made. So I went back in retro when I experienced Whatley. Was it Whatley? Yeah,
Wheatley,
it was Whatley.
Wheatley or whatever. Yeah.
Was it Wheatley?
Yeah, voiced by Stephen Merchant. Yeah.
Okay. When I finished interacting with Wheatley, I went back in retroactively downgraded my opinion of GLaDOS, the character. I was like, oh, she was just the comic relief character. She wasn't this malevolent entity. She's just playing the same role that Wheatley was playing in 2. Right?
Oh.
And maybe I did that and did a disservice to the GLaDOS character, but to me it was just I reevaluated what happened in Portal 1 based on the interactions with Wheatley in Portal 2.
I personally really enjoyed number 2, and I just see them as distinct games. Number 1 was made from it was a student project that was, picked up by Valve, but still very little money went into making that game. There was nothing. It hardly had a big studio or anything.
Okay,
it was just threw together.
Well,
that's not. I don't want to.
That's the
But
game
I
versus
don't
the
wanna say
character.
that I don't want anybody to think that I didn't enjoy both games. I enjoyed them both a lot, but
Okay.
if we're talking about how iconic a character GLaDOS is, we're introduced to that character not that character, but a character that's playing the same role that GLaDOS played in Portal 1 and Portal 2, and that character is a comic relief character in Portal 2. Right?
Yeah.
And so again, when it was all said and done, they're great games, loved them, played them to death. Right? They're both fantastic, but when I got done, I went, "Oh, GLaDOS in Portal 1 isn't the malevolent overlord, she's the comic relief." And so it's not played off as I'm going to kill you at the end of this, try and survive. It's I'm going to kill you at the end of this, cue the laugh track.
Interesting. See, for me, like I said, I still remember the whole hit from GLaDOS, but that's an interesting take on when you kind of take it all together, how you can look back at the characters and kind of get some thought on it. All right, we're going to take a break. Going to play a quick song OC remix. This one, because we got some air on it, going to be a Pokemon remix, Pokemon X Born from the Ashes from OC Remix. It's going to be just over 3 minutes, and we're going to take a break and come back to continue talking about some of these potentially iconic or memorable characters that we've experienced in gaming throughout the years. And I think there's an opportunity for you guys to really help us with especially some of the stories that are out there, because characters we love and see, but I know there's some stories that have been told that have really had impact on us and have, because of that, some characters in those that you're just like, oh, that moment, oof, or that character throughout gave me so much feel about what I was playing, and therefore I will forever remember this character and this interaction. Because I'm thinking of some of these stories in games I haven't played, like Last of Us and some of those that seem to come to mind as maybe having some really memorable characters throughout them. So with that, though, we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back, and I'm definitely interested in looking at more of the characters that you don't play, but you get to experience while you're playing, and how they created memories for all of us. All right, with that, we'll be back, and like I said, just over 3 minutes.
You're listening to Show X on btwproductions.com.
Welcome back, everybody listening, watching, seeing us on Twitch. How it going? All right, so we are talking today a little bit about just kind of the characters that we've experienced throughout gaming. And in doing so, the ones that are very memorable, bring up thoughts and like evoke the emotions in us of having played through these games and experienced the stories being told around these various characters. So with that, I wanted to keep going in. I do want, looking at the poll, I appreciate you guys all participating in it. And I guess I do have to give a little bit more love. We don't have to talk about further, but to Cloud, because he is currently leading the pack.
Oh,
when it
yeah.
comes to,
Which is surprising, by the way.
well, but it is memorable in the sense that, I mean, so many people played. And so I understand why he's up on that list. And because Final Fantasy is such an epic series and people's interaction with it, like we said. And admittedly, there's more to be said with the content surrounding Final Fantasy VII, with the movies that have come out and various things have talked back to it that expanded even further. And so I can still understand why Cloud is very much on that list of like recognized, iconic, memorable. For whatever reason, people can see Cloud and just be like, yep, that's some Final Fantasy stuff right there. You know, similar to how we said with Pikachu. So that, but I got to give that shout based on what I'm seeing in the polls. Another one in the polls that is another player character, but that's looks like currently running second in our list is Solid Snake from the Metal Gear series.
MGS was such a groundbreaking, still is. Some of the mechanics that were even on PlayStation 1 back in the days is just still amazing to this day. I mean, like having to remove your memory card or turn off the game and
plug
stuff
the controller into controller port 2.
Yeah, all that stuff. That's just so like meta that, and never mind the ridiculous cutscenes, etc. That some of which would last literally hours or days. That's just crazy. It was they really broke and also shaped the mold.
Yeah, the second playthrough when you get the invisibility cloak. Probably in my top 5 funnest gaming experiences, right? Because you're basically invisible, so you walk up to a guard and punch them in the face, and they're like, "What? What was that noise? What?" I laughed so hard at that. I probably spent. I would not be surprised if I spent an hour just running around the first area with the invisibility cloak on, just jacking people in the face.
Well, it's because it was so hard, right? When a game is so hard and then rewards you with it like that when you actually complete it, that's a good feeling, and then you really enjoy, that ease, and you feel like you've earned it.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't mind when a game adds it after the fact kind of thing. But some of the other things about Solid Snake, right? Because he was another character that I believe, because of, at least from what I'd watch, there was a lot of story in it, right? So it fleshed out the character you are as Solid Snake, let alone all the other variations of Snake, clones of Snake, and stuff like that throughout the whole thing. That it seems like Snake's DNA or aspects of it kind of are everywhere in the universe. But that the one you're playing, right, you get for me, the little bit I played on the original NES versions, the comms that you'd get back and forth to base, like you'd go into that little side screen, right? And it's like, Snake, we need you to like whatever, and Snake's responses and things. So you actually got some back and forth from him. It wasn't just him being the silent protagonist the whole time. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I think that, for me, is important in character development such, or what adds to the feel of it is actually knowing what your character's doing.
Live poll update. We're now drawing between Solid Snake and Cloud. I think the attention that we drew to those two has increased the votes. Now there's 10 each.
Oh.
Well, and in the next place we currently have with 8 is Lara Croft, which is, again, no surprise, followed by Duke Nukem at 6, then Earthworm Jim at 5.
I didn't even talk about Earthworm Jim. I think that one's mostly because I don't know if Earthworm Jim you get much. I'm trying to remember because I love the first game of it. It's a nice, tough platformer. But do you get much from Jim himself as what he's doing other than amazing cartoonish animation that's like going into his interaction with the world?
I think that's the thing, right? It was novel at the time. The Sega Genesis did not have a ton of platforming games, and the animations were the draw to that. Besides the difficulty, yeah. I mean, it's fantastic. And yeah, he was unique at the time. Like
the fact that he was in a powered, I guess you'd have to argue, spacesuit kind of thing, running around and using his own actual head and body of the worm as a tool to fight with as a whip.
Yeah,
was
right?
was impressive.
It was a fun platformer.
So everybody knows who. Well, I say everybody, but Earthworm Jim is getting votes, and nobody's said word one about Kid Chameleon.
Well, admittedly, you say Kid Chameleon, and I do not recognize. Like, I think I've heard the name, but an actual image doesn't come up.
It was the Sega Genesis version of Mario, right? It was a platforming game. You
oh my god,
had helmets, and helmets. The helmets changed the mechanics of what you could do. Like, there was a ninja helmet. There was a helmet that turned you into a spiky-headed animal that you could bash through walls with.
That is just such cheating and pulling from the other side. Wayne, could you share like the screen of onto the show of the Kid Chameleon like cover picture for like the art on the front of the game? It's so bad. It's hilariously cheesy.
No,
I've never seen such a cheesy cover before.
It's terrible, but I mean,
so bad.
Yeah, it is bad.
Sorry, I'm being way under pressure here. But basically,
I can do it. I got this.
A kid with sunglasses, skateboarding, looking really cool, windswept hair and everything.
Yeah. So I
man,
mean,
that's cringy.
But it has 100 plus levels and 1,850 plus screens.
Yeah. I know I haven't seen a third of them. Oh, there it is. Look at that bad boy. I remember bringing that home from the game rental, the video rental store for a weekend and dumping hours into that game going, yeah, I really don't need Super Mario Brothers. I've got Kid Chameleon. I never thought that ever.
You know that meme where it's like hey mom, can we get X? And the mom's like, oh no, we've got X at home. That's Sonic at home, right?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, and just for the sake of Soda Pop, since you guys brought it in there, which is hilarious, right? Other ones that I never played, right? But Gex, the gecko, I think it was Gex the gecko.
Yeah, I never touched that either.
So unfortunately for me, and this is where I appreciate you guys bringing up stuff in the chat, because I have only played so many games, right? It's such, as much as I game all the time and play the heck out of them, there's only so many I made because, but I hear stuff like another one that is in its own right for people who played it probably like, holy cow, that character would be like Conker, right? From Conker's Bad Fur Day or such, or I think that's how I said it. Because the type of game being played there was so unique and was arguably a really good game, but they also provided it in such a way that it was adult, right? And so those who did play it were like, man, that squirrel or such was something special in its own right. Yeah. I do want to go back in the chat at least to mention.
Can we talk about ensemble, like character ensembles?
Yeah, of course.
I think so. Real quick though, I just want to say, because I won't go in depth.
Yeah.
For its sake of what kind of character it is, yes. Lantis, I agree. Navi from the Legend of Zelda series is very memorable because anyone who played Ocarina or anything and had to hear, hey, listen, so many times, you remember that character. Whether it was love, hate, or dismissiveness, you remember Navi.
I think it's annoying characters who are like narrators or helpers or tip givers or assistants or whatever will be memorable. Like Tails from Sonic is also very memorable. The Guildmaster from Fable constantly telling you like, hey, you've got experience points. You can afford and you level up. Even though there's like 400 of them and every time you kill something, you pass the level to buy something else. It's so irritating. But you remember them because of that. They forced you to remember those characters, but they're memorable because of it.
Mika Serrano brings up, wait, you mean Clippy from Microsoft Word?
The most memorable video game character of them all.
Oh, yeah, right there. But that's the thing, right? Because good characters or memorable characters add to the experience in gaming. Babs, can we have a second list on the characters more annoying than Claptrap? If you were to rank that,
No
well,
such
so
thing.
so admit it, we're bringing up memorable characters in general, and such that this show is pretty broad, and we can kind of go all directions with the characters that we're mentioning. There is something to be said, and we're happy to exercise if you guys would like us on another show to focus on a more specific group. And so a genre like that of most annoying characters and the headline of more so than Claptrap would be an interesting conversation. And what is it that makes certain characters bad or more annoying or things like that? And I think often it is the like constant interaction where you're like, could we just not? You know, because there's certain ones for me that are like characters that are a bit creepy or odd, like, and I'm sure he's memorable and fun in its own right, but Tingle, if it is from the Zelda series. Because why? Why does that character have to exist? But
I'm just laughing.
so, but for you, Todd, you were saying about ensembles. And what came to mind when you were thinking about that with like an ensemble group that is like the memorable?
So I saw individual characters from GTA San Andreas,
Okay.
and I think the Grove Street family as an ensemble being a parody of NWA,
Gotcha.
right? Like all of them together, it would be like saying, okay, who's the best West Coast rapper of the early 1990s, right? You could say Ice Cube, you could say Dr. Dre, you could say Tupac, but they were the best when they were all together,
Oh, I see. That's interesting.
right?
So like
Like,
Sonic and Knuckles or Sonic and Tails are kind of like an ensemble as well.
Kind of. Mario and Luigi. Like Mario always gets top billing, but like if you went over to somebody else's house to play, you were always Luigi.
Right.
Yeah.
You had to be player 2.
You were always player 2.
Or like always Tails or always yes. Those kind of things, those situations.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
nobody played Tails, so you had to be Knuckles.
Banjo and Kazooie.
Well, at least those ones played
yeah.
together, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think
So,
because ensembles. I'm trying to think of other ones like that, but there are
like,
definitely groups out.
people, Yeah, I just saw it in the list. Like people brought up Big
Well,
Smoke was in the list, and
in a similar
CJ,
way.
I think was in the list, and that's
Okay.
that's all well and good. But I loved the idea of the Grove Street family being a parody of NWA.
Gotcha.
Or at least that's how I always looked at it. Maybe
Well, yeah.
they were supposed to be a parody of somebody else, but it's just like, okay, there's Ice Cube, there's MC Ren, there's Dr. Dre, there's Easy E, there's like, you could just point them out and it's like, okay, this is who these people are supposed to be.
And I think that does lend itself because it was a blend into reality of something to kind of attach to. When you were mentioning ensembles, one of the things I was thinking of is kind of back to, and I don't know if it actually applies because there's individual bonuses in them, but we have a lot on our list of specific fighting characters from different games. And so you get this discussion like, and we haven't talked about any of them, right? Like the various Mortal Kombat characters from all the way back, like the memorability, because arguably between like Mortal Kombat, Sub-Zero and Scorpion, I would say are probably more recognizable than most. And Scorpion maybe has the edge because of the catchphrase, right? The whole "get over here" part of it.
Get over here.
Yeah, and so you get a bit of like any of those characters. And so I'm wondering, can we discuss, or is there something to even be thought about with the ensembles of various fighting games and stuff? Because I'd almost say that there are certain fighting games as a whole that have more story, more character-driven things in them than others, which is always tough with fighting games because you just all these characters together now fight, right?
Yeah, but like how do you do infinite sequels if these people fight to the death?
Right, constantly.
Like I've got to come up with a whole new cast of characters because everybody except one person's dead.
I've yet to see the game to do that, right? It's just you always resurrect and add more. and it's funny, Soda Pop's bringing up like Killer Instinct, Clay Fighter stuff. The things that's challenge with fighting games for me is there's so many fighting games, and some of them are distinctive in their art design and things like that, mechanics, other things. So it's a challenge for me to think if any of them really showcase as characters. But I'm trying to think if there's a certain fighter in any one of those games, any of them really, that it just stood out for some reason, that individual character in the fighting game was like, oh man, that character or the thing like that, good or bad, right? Is it Street Fighter 2 and Zangief? Because why would anybody play Zangief?
No one would play Zangief. Yeah.
Is that an iconic thing or a memorable thing about a character in a fighting game? Or is it
Orchid from Killer Instinct?
Because you can do an infinite combo and kill somebody without them being able to do anything?
Well, not only that, but her taunt at the end, where she took her baton and slapped herself on the ass with it, and like her whole body jiggled. Right? I mean, it was just like, okay, if you want torture porn for 15-year-olds in 1991, right? If you're a bicentennial baby and you want to torture somebody for 10 hours a day, have that screen playing on repeat.
Is that the one that goes into how I got introduced to BDSM? But
terrible.
So I that's one that, and why I bring it up is basically because a lot of those characters have been mentioned, and I don't know if there's any one of them that to me is like why this one was so much, I'm trying to think some of the bad guys from some of the various games that you eventually get to play. Although there's the issue there with most of them that once you unlocked them, it was like the actual playable version was meh compared to, right?
Sagat. Sagat was better. Sagat arguably was better than Ryu and Ken.
Okay.
Sagat had both the low and the high fireball, plus the dragon punch, plus a knee at intermediate range. That moveset's just better. And by that same vein, somebody said Hagar from Final Fight, and you have to it was his background was he's the mayor of the city that Final Fight takes place in, and he's an ex-pro wrestler. And as soon as you say that, I have to tell you that Max from Streets of Rage 2 is just better. And oh, by the way, Streets of Rage 2 is the best fighting game of the side-scrolling beat-em-up of that era, in an era where there was 10 million side-scrolling beat-em-up games.
Gotcha. Well, and because there were so many, I don't know them all.
But I'll bet you that most of the people in our chat know who Hagar is. More people know who Hagar is than know who Max is in Streets of Rage 2.
Gotcha.
So just a random side note here. We missed out somebody that is so vitally important to video game lore, and I can't believe I just realized it after an hour and a half, and none of us have thought of this so far.
The ball from Pong.
No.
The story of the ball.
Almost as ubiquitous. I don't know why I keep trying to say that word when I can't say it. Abe from Abe's Odyssey. Classic. Video game classic.
Interesting. So Abe I would give you Abe has a lot of character in him. And I didn't really actually play Abe's Odyssey. I know of it, and I've seen the screens, and it looked like an amazing puzzle / it didn't count as partially like stealth, but I know it's basically a puzzle game, is how I describe it. Somewhat platformy, but puzzle game, as you try to rescue, all of the other of his race.
Hmm.
If I'm not mistaken.
It's a very depressing world, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like not a happy experience, but it's a great gameplay to get through, and it's a very rewarding experience to play through it. I can't speak to it because I didn't play Abe's. I'm aware of it. And so interesting.
No, it's one that I remember from my childhood, along with Earthworm Jim, is playing that along with Abe's Odyssey, and I remember being much more frustrated with Abe's Odyssey than I was with Earthworm Jim. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I just hated the fact that, in fact, I think my buddy Graham recently played Abe's Odyssey. I think for the first time or second time maybe, and he was saying that there was so much of it that was like, you go and solve the whole level, you get to the end, you pull a lever, that changes something at the very start. So you need to go all the way back to the start again. So it had a good way of having, replayability, or at least, artificial lengthening of the game. So, yeah.
So, but what was it about Abe as a character that made him so interesting?
He was funny. He was funny while also being incredibly depressing.
Interesting. So was it like the internal feels of, I get you, Abe. I get you.
It was just a future life into office work, I guess. It was a little bit of seeing what that would be like one day.
Oh, man.
I don't.
I have to admit,
yeah,
I have to admit, I don't have any sort of connection with those characters because those games are not necessarily my jam.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
right? So I just never interacted with them, so I don't have any. Like, I saw Leisure Suit Larry pop up in the list, and the again, those games are not my jam. Like, I think the little interaction I've had with those games is funny as hell, but I don't have any connection with them. Same thing with Commander Keen, right? Slightly different, more of a platformy game, but yet not necessarily my jam, and a game that I don't have any necessarily connection to. We were talking about Duke Nukem before, and the original Duke Nukem, not Duke Nukem 3D, but if you go all the way back, right, is a platforming game.
Okay.
I
never played that one.
Yeah, no, it's one of those Apogee shareware. Like, I played through the first, 3-4 levels of the original Duke Nukem because it was one of those old Apogee shareware games before id was a thing, but it was made by the id guys.
Okay.
Originally.
Yeah, no, it was part of the entire lineup of those.
Yeah.
So we're getting, we're starting to creep up on the show, and we've been all over the place this one, admittedly. But I am kind of curious, thinking about characters that impacted your gameplay that weren't necessarily you. Was there ever villains or the big boss or something that you guys remember in a game that really got you as to, like, I'm dreading getting to this person because they're so impactful to what my experience has been, or gosh, I cannot wait to put the hurt on this character because they have been goading me this whole time and I want them done. Because, like, one for me that just comes to mind, but it's mostly, I think, the storytelling in the game. Because I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. But it's basically the main antagonist in BioShock. That you end up... The one you're actually going... And it's mostly, I think, the presentation of the story and the reveal that you get in BioShock of how manipulated you've been.
Or Andrew Ryan.
Well, is it Andrew Ryan that made it, or is he the one you're going to? Or is
Andrew Ryan made the city, but he's the one that was overthrown. But the one who's telling you what to do is Atlas, whose name is
okay,
Frank Fontaine.
Okay, that one, because that, as you learn more and more, I'm like, man, this fool, and the way it plays out, it hit me of like, oh, I hate you in so many ways right now. Because of the way it played out, and you've been taking at me this whole adventure, this whole thing I've been doing, coming over voice and the stuff saying, I'm just like, oh, and you get scenes that let you know I want to get to you, and when I do, it's like it's even worse. And so that was one for me that actually going towards that end point, I felt attached to wanting it to get a result, right? I wanted that guy dead and stuff.
I think the guy I wanted to kill most, and I can think of at the top of my head, is probably because I played it last year, was the most recent God of War game, the Norse god Baldur, who is basically invincible, and he is just constantly coming at you and trying to kill your kid, and you're just this nice stoic dude trying to get on with stuff, and this guy keeps trying to fight you. And the annoying thing is you drop a mountain on him, an actual mountain, and he just gets up and starts chasing you again. You break his neck and he just gets up and starts chasing. It is so irritating. You're just like, freaking die. You're like throwing punches at repeatedly nonstop, and it's just so annoying. Love that game. I'm gonna play against him.
Well, and I like, because Legend brings up like G-Man from Half-Life as an interesting character that you almost never learn any real details about, but is there. And when you play through again, especially, or you start seeing something you note whenever you kind of see him, you're just like, what are you doing, man? What the heck? And then as the series continues, right, into Half-Life 2, he's actually a part of it, right? And it's almost like he comes up as saying, I'm this entity that is bringing you forward because you're needed. And he always creeped me out, right? This like, what's this about? And what is it that you can't do that I have to do as Gordon, right? It's like, what the heck? And again, then following on, Soda Pop's bringing up the whole Handsome Jack piece where at Porsche, see, I'm trying to remember because
that got real old real fast.
So my challenge is the first introduction I had to Handsome Jack worked for me, and it had a similar thing with the kind of personality he presented and such, and into scenes that became meta or available within the game itself, right? The whole like, what with all this money, what am I gonna do? Buy a, crystal unicorn that shines out rainbows or whatever it was. I forget the official thing he was talking about. That, by the way, shows up in Tiny Tina's adventure. But throughout that, his target stuff was like, yeah, I want to kill this fool. And this and that. But the challenge was it just kept going, right? Or they continued with him to a point where I lost interest. And, like, I never went through the prequel part with him fully. It was just like,
So
the butt stallion.
what I think they did wrong is they tried to, and this is Gearbox story writers, right, for Borderlands 2. They tried to make Handsome Jack a monster and then tried to turn him into a comedy character. Because if you listen to the logs, spoiler alert for Borderlands 2, seriously, like what? Anyway, if you listen to some of the audio logs in like the first town for Borderlands 2, like they give you an indication of what happened to the people of Sanctuary that you left in Borderlands 1, right?
Okay.
And I don't remember what her name is, but she's a marshal. She was a marshal in Sanctuary. And basically in these audio logs, Handsome Jack and one of the bosses from like Act 1 of the game like show up and they slaughter everybody. And it's over these three, and Jack's taunting her about the way she looks. And like he's being a real kind of dick, but at the end they kill everybody, right? And you're like, oh, this guy's a monster. In fact, like at that point I wanted to kill him, and as soon as he's naming Unicorn's butt stallion, I was just like, yeah, you're whatever. Like I'm going to kill you at some point, and I'm not going to care when I do it because we're literally not out of the introductory area and it's already old.
Gotcha.
Like, and you're gonna deal with this for another 20 hours.
Well, that's where it became, in many ways, more an annoyance than actual, like, I have a real desire to destroy this. Because,
which I think, and I think if they had done it the opposite way, like if they had introduced, like, here's this character who's going to be comic relief and like taunt you the whole way, but when you get into the city that Handsome Jack was building, or that Hyperion Corporation was building, like there's that whole Hyperion city, and you fight loaders and whatnot, and there's a handful of quests in there. If you had found out at that point that he's a monster, I think it would have painted him in a much more like he's the protagonist, like the main character of Joker, right? That he's got this stuff going on in his head, but it's only going on in his head, and in fact he is a monster. Okay. And then it's been like, okay, I have to kill this guy for the good of everybody, rather than, oh, this guy's a monster, but he's also a giant D-bag, so he's gonna die and I'm not gonna care.
Gotcha. Huh. Well, because I got you. And it's interesting because if nothing else, he is memorable. And in the first side of it, I thought like good villain, and later it just like the trope was taken too far. One that's probably too old for everyone but Octal and I. But always comes to mind when you start thinking back to really set the stage for the world you were in is Shodan. I believe his name from the old System Shock.
Oh, right. Yeah. I played that years ago.
Because it was
Wow,
like
I don't.
Eve. Oh, did you ever play it, Todd?
I did not.
It
So
was a good game.
the thing about Shodan, right, was a basically evil AI that controls the space station and everything that you're on, going around and is actively trying to kill you throughout, and sending essentially, was it like zombieized people or such after you and things, and you're working against this AI the entire time that just makes the world terrible for you. And so that's when it's memorable. And the challenge is, again, if you didn't play, it's an old enough game that for most people don't think, but made a very creepy experience throughout. And so a satisfaction of trying to survive that was pretty intense. I like that Soda
Like
Pop
the
brings up.
character archetype is really good, though, right? You get dropped into a world and you start doing stuff, and there's a character that's acting in an antagonistic role toward you, right? But they're just a voice, and you don't know anything about them. So there's also the drama of not knowing on top of, or the suspense of not knowing on top of, the baseline antagonism. And I think those make for better characters as a rule, right? Like just given a bad guy who's just right there and in your face all the time versus the bad guy or the antagonist character that you don't see for the first 2/3 of the game. I think the antagonist character that you don't see makes for the better character overall. I mean, obviously superior writing is going to win out in the end, but I think all other things being equal,
Just kind of the quality of a character to have to experience or deal with throughout.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of characters that are somewhat out of reach the whole time, villains and such, that you do have to build up to and finally get the boss battle through, but
Right.
are having a direct impact on you throughout. I do like that kind of entity. I like the idea of when you're playing a role in a game and you're initially kind of a little nobody or something that's kind of the threat, then as it keeps building and growing, they start taking notice and really start focusing where you start in the world, right? It's things like that I'm kind of like, that's kind of cool, right? I've built myself up now where, oh crud, I am being targeted by the badness in this world. Here's one that's kind of, or unless either of you guys had one, I was going to say that because as I'm trying to think of villains and such and various things, there's iconic characters at the moments and scenes and stuff. There's characters in games that give you the heebie-jeebies or stuff like that. There's, what is it, Pyramid Head and such from...
Oh, Pyramid Head's a good one. He's one that's very memorable, and not only that, but he has a presence in the film scene and such as well, and cosplay. People really enjoy his character in general, even though it's, in terms of personality and such, is a bit... There's nothing. It's more just the look, isn't it? There's not really much behind who the character is.
But it's also how the character played in the game.
Yeah.
Because it's not like he just ran at you, right? It's the slow, like kind of stalking around the hallways and things like that he's the big bad that you just don't want to randomly run into.
Right.
Right? That really creates an ominous feel and scene about it where you're just like, don't want one of them, right? It's my effect with it.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about World of Warcraft yet, or the Warcraft universe yet.
And that's a good one, yeah.
Based on what you just said, the Fel Reaver is an iconic character.
Good one.
Everybody who played TBC had an interaction with the Fel Reaver at some point.
Okay.
Right? And he's playing the exact same role as Pyramid Head is, but in the in the opening zone of the Burning Crusade, right?
That's a good one. Yeah, he's kind of ominous as well because he's always creeping around, and even though he makes so much noise, if you dare listen to Warcraft radio or something instead, he'll sneak up behind you and
he's huge. he's making a ton of noise, and he's just stomping. He's just stomping around the zone, right? Just stomping around. Like, he doesn't go anywhere near any of the towns, so it's not like he doesn't adversely affect the questing process. And once you know what to look for, like, he's not that big of a deal. But I've been caught out before. Like, I'm about to initiate combat, and he doesn't resolve in, or I don't see him at first. And now it's like, oh gosh, I'm knee deep in killing this thing. Now I've got to do it fast to get out of range, because he was. What level was he? Was he 68 or 70, I think?
Yeah, he was question mark to you when you first go into...
Yeah, it's okay. He was level 70. Yep.
Another villain that we should talk about as well is Diablo, right? A whole freaking series named after just the big bad. That's pretty iconic, right? I mean, his face is on the cover of the games, and it's all about going and defeating him, even though it's pretty easy to defeat Diablo at the end. Or is it her? Diablo's a female, right?
I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, I didn't get into the Diablo series enough.
I don't know. Insert Glenn Beck rant.
Well, so my curiosity about Diablo, though, is that it's the big baddie in the series is named after, but your actual interaction with Diablo is what? It's just
killing
him. Diablo, right? Where if you look at the series, though, because someone else had brought it up about... was it Drakkar Kane or whatever his name is?
Deckard Cain, yeah.
Deckard Cain, because that's actually someone you interact with, right, in the games, and is like continuously brought up in the storyline and stuff that I feel like would be more memorable as an actual character in the series. And just like when you're talking up about, because we did not touch WoW really, but people talked in there about Thrall and stuff like that, because admittedly, when you have a game like WoW, there's story so deep into it that certain stories, if you take the time to actually listen to them, read them, unfortunately WoW can be partial, read a whole bunch of journals, or in some cases the specific cutscenes and things that you actually get to experience. But like the entire story that you get in there behind, with the A, and I saw him in the list, Arthas.
Yep.
Yeah. Arthas Skywalker. and his evil alter ego Darth Lich King.
Oh, that makes me so mad, Todd. that just rubs me the wrong way.
I'm sorry, dude. I read the Arthas book, enjoyed the hell out of it, but I've seen this story before. Like all the way down to Padme Amidala being Jaina Proudmoore. Or vice versa, because technically Amidala came first, but like I'm just saying there's a mapping there. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm not saying one's a ripoff of the other, except I kind of am. But and by the way, to me, Sylvanas Windrunner would be the runaway favorite of this whole thing if they hadn't ruined her in what was it, Battle for Azeroth, where they...
Oh, she's terrible. She is a ridiculous character. Yeah.
Yeah, no, she totally is stupid. Now, up until I think up until Battle for Azeroth.
Yeah, she really lost it, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I love her. I love her storyline.
Yep, she was a fascinating character. That's why she got thrusted at the forefront, right? That's why she replaced Trollface, because he was pretty useless, right? I mean, he was interesting in Warcraft 3, and then he disappeared from most of World of Warcraft until he was suddenly War Chief, and you're like, oh yeah, the leader of the trolls. I forgot about that guy. So yeah, I think Sylvanas is a very good character to have there, and so is Arthas, especially since Arthas is making not a literal comeback, but not even a theoretical, but it's an homage to Arthas' storyline is happening again right now in Shadowlands. So I think he was not only the face of Warcraft 3 and the face of Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne, but he was also the face of Wrath of the Lich King as well, of course. So he was just such a titular character, right? He was so central to Warcraft's storyline alongside Thrall.
So let's talk about. I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to get into that a little bit deeper because if you look at Vanilla WoW, TBC and Lich King is sort of a three act play or a 3 game story arc, right? He's got the Arthas character specifically has got a multi-year story arc.
Yeah.
In terms of like lore and stuff. And you don't get that kind of storytelling anymore.
No, you
and
don't.
I'd say, I'm gonna tie this back, but it's the best comparable that I can think of. The seeds for the Hulk Hogan Andre the Giant match at WrestleMania 3 started getting those seeds started to get planted over a year before in the run up to WrestleMania 2. And like nobody's got that kind of patience anymore to tell a 15-month long, I mean in pro wrestling terms, like you don't do it, it's like 4 weeks and out anymore.
Okay.
Because you have pay-per-views every month. So you have to end your storyline at the pay-per-view and start your new storylines the next month. This thing went, an entire calendar year. And it was great. Same kind of thing I think with World of Warcraft and Arthas, where we got that the TBC as an expansion, like we kind of know who we're fighting, and Illidan's a bad guy and Kael'thas is a bad guy, right? And these are bad guys, but it isn't until we make and I guess we defeat. Is it killed Jaden in the Sunwell?
Yes, in the Sunwell. Yep.
Yeah. But it's all, all roads lead going on even all the way back to the Warcraft 3 lore. All roads lead to Arthas and the Lich King.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right? Up until the point that he's defeated at the end of Wrath, and then we go on to do other things. Like, and that's why I guess I want to take this thread a little bit farther real quick. That's why it was disappointing to find out that Sargeras had been taken out so soon.
Well, that was his avatar, right? It wasn't actually him that was killed there. It was like he was attempting to come through, and some of his power got through. He's fine. It was like his hand that got attacked.
Oh,
like,
okay.
He dies in Legion. That's when we finally actually defeat the Burning Legion in its entirety, and Burning Legion is forever gone in that expansion. By the way, shout out to Graham, who just privately messaging me, mentioned that he had to stop listening because he's now interested in playing Silent Hill 1 for the first time after us talking about Pyramid Head and stuff. So he's gone off and played. Now he's playing, I think, a PlayStation 1. So,
oh my god!
Oh wow!
You know what? I couldn't remember if it was Silent Hill or Resident Evil. But it was Resident Evil that had the rip-off Pyramid Head character in one of the films.
Oh, really?
Right? Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, the films went too far, so now I'm trying to think which.
I haven't watched them. So,
so much like the Hellraiser movies, I have watched all of the Resident Evil films.
I have seen them all. I just don't remember them.
I have a good story to share. I've shared the story a few times before, but I'll do it again because it's appropriate, and I will once a year or so if I can. When I was about 7 years old, my parents got me a PlayStation 1, and one of the first games I got for it was Resident Evil, because my parents thought, it's probably fine. Like they didn't really care about age ratings on video games at that time. They did afterwards, but not at that time. And so I was sitting like all excited playing Resident Evil, and it's creepy. You're walking around this mansion. Well, I say you're walking around the mansion. You're moving the 3 pixels that are your character around the 12 pixels that are the mansion. It's not actually that bad. And you go around the corner at one point with your main character, and it kind of goes to a cutscene, and it zooms in on this zombie leaning over this other like corpse, like chewing on it, and the narrator goes, "Oh no, it's Kenneth from Stars." And I just, like 6-year-old, 7-year-old me, just had a mental breakdown, like a nervous breakdown. I turned off the PlayStation, I put the disc inside its case, and hid it behind the TV.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Apparently I had nightmares for like 3 weeks after that, and kept waking up crying and everything.
Oh, man. I guess an advantage to my name in that rarely does it show up in media. Oh, that's great.
No, you get the Dave Chappelle, Wayne Brady segment.
Being with some friends yesterday, I saw where they decided they needed to add something and give me a nickname, and so of the 3 or 4 that I ever run into, they decided on the Bruce Wayne connection, and such. But again, it's like never anything that calls me out directly where I feel like I'm being targeted. So I love the idea of that kind of saying they're like, nope, that.
Indeed. Indeed. So we have got 10 minutes left. I'm now going to kill the poll, which is a bit of a shame because we have a tie for
no. Don't kill it. There's been a lot of requests from people to leave it active and for us to post links so that people can vote on it in the next week, such that on next week's show, we can talk about the results of that after a bunch of other people weighed in, kind of what reared its head, what showed up that we may not be expecting right now, because we do have our limited sample, and we appreciate you guys for participating. That's a big boon to us. It helps us the conversation, bringing up some names that we might have otherwise missed or not brought up. There's a lot in there we didn't touch, right? There's a lot in there that was kind of like, look at that. You know, the discussions where we bring up Mario and Luigi and stuff being iconic in their own rights and stuff like that. And again, our press, or my push of kind of like the story being driven around the characters, you know, didn't bring up really Link or Zelda or, you know, absolutely memorable iconic characters. But for me, are diminished by Link primarily being the silent protagonist, right? That it's just, I'm here, and I poke things with the sword and throw the boomerang, right? But you play some amazing games. Yeah, he does make a lot of oof, and stuff. But you do get to but you experience a wonderful game through his eyes, through controlling that avatar, right? And so it's an interesting position in that. So I would like to, I look forward to kind of hearing or seeing what bubbles up through the rest of them, of what people kind of focus on. And I like also the list because there's so many on here that I am aware of and others that I do recall, and it brings memories seeing their names come up. Then I'm like, man, you know, my brother put in there Mike Tyson from Punch-Out, right? From Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, right? Because if nothing else, anyone who ever got to him, I still admit I've never beaten him, but got to him many times. That got second round, woohoo! But dang that guy.
Right. Let me go through this list here. We've still got a good few minutes left. Let me go through the list here and give a shout out to some of the lesser spoken about ones, or the least voted ones. So I'll do 2 votes or less. I'll talk about all those briefly. So we have Doom Guy sitting on 2 votes. That's surprising because he is iconic. Like some of the original video game first-person shooters out there. That's pretty surprising. Illidan with 1 vote. Arthas, no, that's fine. He's got 3. Luigi with 0. You guys, poor Luigi.
As is his life.
Nobody likes Luigi.
As is his life.
He's gotten the ass end of everything, really.
Right? Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He's the worst character in American Super Mario Brothers 2.
Poor Luigi.
I know.
He doesn't get the girl.
We've got Carl Johnson from Grand Theft Auto with 2 votes, which is surprising again because CJ, you know, I don't know about you guys, but GTA was kept quite core to my teenage years. Yeah. Legend of Zelda is mentioned here, which I'm guessing just means Zelda herself. With 1 vote, we got Aerith Gainsborough. What's that?
Aerith is the one from Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, that's why I don't know it. Okay.
I didn't know Gainsborough was her last name.
Yes.
So somebody went deep lore on that.
Ken, you know, me in video game form, only 1 vote. Depressing, guys. Who can you not vote for me? Sagat? Who's Sagat from?
Street Fighter 2.
So those are all Ryu, Ken, and Sagat are all Street Fighter.
He's a bad guy that you could play in after Vega, but before Bison.
Right.
But you could play as him, and he's just the best fireball thrower by far, because he's got a high fireball and a low fireball.
There's also Big Daddy from the BioShock 1 and 2 series. There's Cloud, which is, by the way, again, the thing about gaming, Big Daddy's quite a big gaming figure, by the way.
Well, he's another. Well, as one of those villains, I do have to say, Big Daddy. The first time you really run into a Big Daddy in the game is no bueno, sucks, and you're just like, no, No.
Drips a guy through the glass, right? And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
all
but
right.
because at first you feel protected, and then you don't. And oof.
Dante from Devil May
Dante.
Cry. That's a good one. And only got 1 vote. That's surprising because Dante, again, big part of my life growing up anyway. Max Payne has 2 votes. Again, great games. Oh my god. Ganon with 0. Cortana
Wow.
with 1. Cortana only has 1. Yoshi with 1. Soap McTavish, that's Call of Duty, with 0. Alex Vance with 0. Clementine with 1. Sans from Undertale. I thought that would have gotten more because there's a lot of hardcore Undertale fans out there. I would have thought there'd be more than 0. Brick from Borderlands with 0. Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, the main character, the redheaded main character from Horizon Zero Dawn, the engineer, sort of badass hunter person. Isaac from Binding of Isaac with 0. That's surprising. Dutch Vanderlind from Red Dead Redemption 2, I believe, which again has only 2 votes. Goose actually managed to get a 3. I don't know how Goose got up to 3. It's
because we talked about it.
Luigi. Elizabeth from BioShock, only 2 votes. I mean, Elizabeth, that's she's so core to me. For me, she represents gaming in some respect for sure. Kratos only has 2. Johnny effing Gat from Saints Row with 0. Tracer with 1. Enrique de Trastamara from EU4. I wonder who put that one in.
I know. Who possibly could have put that one in there?
Pac-Man with 2 votes. Who else we got in here? We got Donkey Kong, Scorpion, all with 2 votes. Jinx from League of Legends only got 1. I think she represents a big chunk of modern gaming.
The challenge with Red is there's too many characters, so it's hard to go iconic.
Yeah,
I mean, Jinx herself, she has a video. She has one of the best song videos in the game. Get Jinxed, but
so good.
And as a character, she's got more personality than most of them because she's insane. She's basically Harlequin in League of Legends.
Let me put it this way: her Get Jinx music video on YouTube currently has 98.8 million views.
Wow.
Yeah,
I legit love it.
Yeah, I listen to it a lot. Quake Guy, Nathan Drake, the Dragonborn from Skyrim, all with 1 vote each. Bayonetta with 0. Alucard with 0.
I'm actually a little sad about that with Bayonetta because Bayonetta's badass. Like
I've never played.
I started going through some things in emulation. Bayonetta has a lot of personality involved, as well as being pretty iconic in her character design and weapons. Having heel-mounted guns on her shoes is pretty darn cool. But yeah.
I'll only do a couple more because we've got for limited time, but the funny ones as well. Elusive Man from Mass Effect, that's a good one. Only 1 vote, though. The Wii Fit Trainer. Guys, why is nobody voted for the Wii Fit Trainer? She is the face of gaming.
Oh, God.
Jill Valentine's got 0 from Resident Evil. That's surprising. And Rayman's got 2 votes now. It had 0 before. People have been going in and voting for Rayman. 343 Guilty Spark, only 1 vote.
I don't know that one.
I wasn't sure
Halo
which
3.
The Rock was meant by The Rock.
I believe it's The Rock, probably from one of the many WWE wrestling games. That's my buddy Graham. We put that one in, and he loves wrestling, so I'm 100% sure that's.
Yep.
So yeah, we've got a lot of game. Oh, I still see some votes coming in, so I'm glad we haven't closed it yet. But go in, guys. Give it votes in the next week. We'll send out that poll once more in the chat, and it'll also be in the description for the YouTube video. So be sure to click and do your votes there, so that we can.
I realize this is recency bias because I just looked at the list myself. How did we not talk about Gandhi from Civ?
Oh,
geez.
Good one.
Probably because we've had a pretty in-depth discussion about Civ and Gandhi's mechanics in the past.
Yeah, I mean,
just put that in.
That's hardcore. Not only gaming lore, but software development lore.
Yeah, that extends to several layers with Gandhi from Civ. That one's man. Again, we talked about the whole actual mechanics behind why he is what he is.
I am so disappointed that we forgot about mentioning Gandhi from Civilization that I'm gonna spite nuke us.
Oh man, yep, I do feel bad for that. But yeah, we're going to keep the list open. We'll probably take a moment to try to clean it up a little bit since we had a couple duplicates in there and try to get like the actual names of the games and parens next to them because I think that helped. And we will keep it open for everyone else to participate in. As you've heard, yeah, we kind of just went fun with today's episode, back and forth about some of these characters and stuff. It adds a little bit of nostalgia and everything. But I really hope that all of you out there, that feel free to give us some guidance or ideas of what you'd like us to cover. The subset of this list, something specific that you're kind of like, yeah, you guys talked about this, but really I want you to rank the top end bosses in fighting games between here and here, right? Or something like that,
Lord.
right? Give us one of those and we will dive into it. We love being able to talk about the subjects you guys want to hear, and that would be great. And so
I think quite enjoy the polling stuff. Yeah. So if you guys have any suggestions for polls in general, let us know. And it doesn't have to be games. It could also be films and stuff or whatever. We're up for whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so we always love to hear from you guys. Just email us in at vtwshowx@gmail.com, and that way we get your responses, as well as if there's any more in particular you want to mention about this episode and what we talked about. Where did we horrendously miss out and go wrong? Where did we say something that you were like, yeah, okay, sure, but they're really not important? Let us know, because we're not always right. I mean, I'm right, but we're not always right. And so
your opinion is wrong, Wayne. Your opinion is wrong.
So we definitely like to hear.
Being right is a show tradition back from the old. From the olden days, we are always right.
Yes, and if we're wrong, you're wrong. But
That's right.
So with that, please jump in and let us know your thoughts on today's episode and what you'd like to see in the future. And feel free to share the poll wide and large. We will revisit it next week to figure out how all of you thought about the list at hand and some of the most memorable characters in gaming. So looking forward to that. And it's fun. I bring that up. If you go look at this subject online, our list started looking big. Most of the lists I saw were 50 most, 70 best, and such. Like, very few lists broke it down to 10. As much as you want to look at it, very few did. And so, like, it's a big subject, and it keeps growing because there's new games all the time. But yeah. Ken, best DLC horse armor. Ay. With that, though, let's let you guys get back to the rest of your week, and let's end things out for today. Ken, could you do us the honor?
Of course. First of all, big shout out to all you guys, all 20 of you who went and voted on that poll. Really appreciate that. It was really nice to have such community feedback on our ideas and what we're doing today, and that's really great to hear from you guys. I really appreciate the support. If you want to check us out all over the interwebs, you can do so by going to one single place that stacks it all together so that you don't have to type out 40 different links. You can just click on one and click on which one you want within there. It's called Linktree. It's linktr.ee/showx. That's linktr.ee/showx. I just typed it in there myself. It's super easy. You go there to go see our Patreon, our Instagram, our Twitter, our Reddit, our Facebook, our yada, 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 yada. It's all in there. So go check all that stuff out. We very much appreciate that. All that support, especially stuff to do with sharing us around. That's the thing that helps the most. If you also have some spare pennies, that's also appreciated through Patreon. It helps keep our software and hardware and services all going for this show, because this ain't free for us to run, believe it or not. So we do need to occasionally just bolster our expenses to keep things going. You can also check out our other sister show on the network, which is Where My Pro's At. It can be found on the Versus the World video YouTube, and also on the Linktree, linktr.ee/Where My Pro's At. And that's for book reviews. We do book reviews over there, so go check that out. Although we're now actually also doing movie reviews for the books that we've covered. So we just did Stepford Wives, and we're about to do To Kill a Mockingbird. So we're having a lot of fun over there doing that sort of stuff. Go check us out. Drop a like, subscribe, all that stuff for both the Where My Pro's At and the Show X videos. All that really helps us out. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you so much for being here. Todd, I thoroughly enjoy you mocking me by comparing Arthas to Skywalker. That's great. And thank you for hosting today, Wayne. We appreciate that as well.
That's gonna keep you up tonight, isn't it?
It's good. I'm already. Yeah, You've ruined my Easter dinner. Like, my wife's through there working hard on a nice dinner for us to enjoy, and I'm gonna be sitting grumbling all the way through. Like, freaking Skywalker.
I'll tell you what. The only thing we missed out in Warcraft 3 is a PhD thesis on sand.
Oh, jeez.
It gets everywhere.
With that, everyone, we are out of here. You have a good week, and we will see you again next week. Much appreciated, and a big salute to all of you out there, and we will catch you again next week. We're out of here. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. See you next zombie. Good night.